Yesterday, we finally got to see what Tarsier Studios, the developers of Little Nightmares 1 and 2, have been up to. They've been working on a brand new game called Reanimal, and the reveal trailer at Gamescom was absolutely fantastic. But if you watched the trailer, you probably had the same thought that I did. This feels familiar. Not only does the game look very similar to Little Nightmares series, albeit with a much darker tone, but it leaves a lingering feeling that you've seen some of this before. Well, what if I told you that this game has far deeper connections to Little Nightmares than you think? In fact, I believe that Tarsier are offering us some pretty big hints to the game, if you know where to look. But hang on, Tericho, I hear you say. Tarsier don't own the rights to Little Nightmares, so there is just no way that those two series can be connected, right? Right? Well, you would be correct. Tarsier are the developers of Little Nightmares, but the owner of that IP is the publisher Bandai Namco. This is why Supermassive are developing Little Nightmares 3 and not Tarsier. But I actually believe that there were hints throughout Little Nightmares 1 and 2 that this was the game that Tarsier always wanted to make. And there are absolutely some spiritual connections between the two. In fact, I think that there are some pretty major hints in Little Nightmares that can absolutely give us some insight into Reanimal. So first, let's break down this trailer showing all the things you might have missed, and then let me explain why Little Nightmares and Reanimal are far more connected than you think. The trailer begins with a shot of a dead lamb and a voice that says,
"Nothing lasts forever."
This lamb is a key character that we'll see throughout the trailer, and the fact that we have a voiceover here is actually pretty significant. Little Nightmares had no dialogue whatsoever. The game itself was based on the principle of show not tell. Outside of a couple of hey or oys in Little Nightmares 2, there was no dialogue to tell us what was happening. We had to watch and try to figure it out for ourselves. So Reanimal will have dialogue, but that principle of show not tell will absolutely be present. The official website describes the game as a minimalist interpretive narrative experience, interpretive being the key there. We then get a shot of this town or city, which does look very similar in some ways to the Pale City of Little Nightmares 2. The buildings look run down and decaying. It looks post-apocalyptic, and I'm sure we're going to have some debates about what happened here. This is also the first time we see the boat. Now this is actually going to be a key mechanic of the game. Once again, the official website states that we're going to be exploring mysterious locations on foot and by boat. Also worth noting is that the game will be fully playable alone, or with online or local co-op. The next shot shows a ladder on a cliffside with the two playable characters climbing it. This use of perspective like this makes them both look very small compared to the world around them, something that Tarsier used in Little Nightmares to make the game feel more scary. Speaking of these two characters though, these are two siblings and the game is all about them trying to rescue their friends. We will come on to them shortly, but both of these characters are wearing masks. The girl is wearing an animal mask, I think it's a rabbit based on this image. That in itself is pretty interesting since the whole game is themed around animals, especially prey animals. We will come back to this later, but the boy's mask is a lot more concerning. His appears to be a sack hood, but if you look closely in some of the later scenes, you can see a section of rope tied around it. The implication here is that this is a noose, the sack of course being something that we often see in depictions of hanging. We then see the dead lamb begin to rise, its bones cracking in a delightfully horrific way. This explains the game's title, Reanimal being a play on the word reanimate, another way of saying bringing something back to life. This pretty much confirms that the animals in this world are being brought back to life, although, as we'll see later, they don't quite come back the same. We see the two characters looking down this well with the bleating sound of a lamb in the background. This might be hinting at a cave or a darker section of the game. There are a fair few parts of this trailer that show incredibly creepy things hiding in the dark, so I look forward to that. Next we see the friend group all together, both in the city and in the boat. Notice how they all seem to be hiding their faces. This hat does kind of look like a gnome from Little Nightmares, and Little Nightmares 2 had several of its characters hide their faces as well. Whether this is part of the story, or whether we get to collect masks like we collected hats in Little Nightmare 2 though remains to be seen. We get a confirmation that there will be human enemies in this game too. This creepy looking dude is pulling someone towards the cinema. You know what they say, there is always that one friend that you have to drag along to the movies. But I do hope that this is one of the locations we get to explore. A creepy cinema full of monsters would be awesome. The next scene shows us our first proper look at one of the animal-human hybrids. This giant spider-looking creature crawls into this room full of abandoned beds on human hands. Now, one thing to note here is that Little Nightmares contained a ton of Easter eggs, or more accurately inspirations, from Studio Ghibli movies. Looking at this creature, I do think this is actually a nod to the sock creatures you can see in several of them. We get another look at this creature in this screenshot, and I'm sure it's going to trigger someone's arachnophobia, but if that wasn't bad enough, we get to see this creature again later in the trailer, and it appears to have human babies clinging to its body. Pure nightmare fuel. I love it. Now, this scene shows the two protagonists surrounded by these giant metal pipes. This does remind me a lot of the design of the Maw, something itself that was inspired by Spirited Away, but the sound of water here hints that this part of the game is going to have aquatic enemies. We even get to see a giant creature in the water later in the trailer, not sure if that's the lamb or another monster. Now, this scene doesn't show much. We see a boat on the beachside with this guiding light in the background, something that is likely going to be key to the water exploration segments. But in the background we can hear the lamb once again, but this time it sounds much bigger. We see the lamb in the very next scene, its elongated neck reaching towards this child. Now, this one actually makes me think it's a nightmare sequence. The child doesn't seem to run away, they just sit there looking dejected. So either they know that the lamb isn't going to kill them, or they have just truly given up. Either way, it's a very bleak picture. Now, you have to look very closely for the next one, as it's a particularly dark scene, but we see another spider-like creature in the darkness destroying this wall here and then vanishing. I actually think this is a different creature to this one. It looks a lot thinner and less hairy. Perhaps it's one of its children even. We see the children running away from something off camera. Now, of course, this game is going to feature a bunch of these chase sequences. These were common in Little Nightmares and were honestly some of the best parts of those games. But then right away we see a really weird scene of this large pig standing over a bathtub as it looks towards the children as they sneak past. Now, I don't think this is the same pig from the teaser, but I do want you to keep the pig in mind because I have more to talk about them in the theory section. We get yet another boat scene. This time we can see dead bodies in the water, but with some weird looking arms in the background. These are most likely going to be trying to grab us, but they do remind me a lot of the arms of the patients in the hospital in Little Nightmares 2. We also see that there is going to be combat. I guess if you play this in co-op, one player will steer the boat while the other one uses harpoons to defend you. Next is probably my favourite scene in the whole trailer. We see another chase scene, except this time the children are running away from a human. The way that he cycles like this on a tricycle that's just a little bit too small for him might be a hint that these monster humans have grown larger than they should be. That would also explain why these children are so small in comparison. But tricycles actually have a history in the horror scene. The Shining is probably the first movie you associate with tricycles, but they've shown up in The Omen, Saw, and even Leprechaun. Perhaps this is Tarsier paying homage to horror movies as well as Studio Ghibli. Notice we get a closer look at the children's masks here too. The white rabbit that the girl wears could be symbolic. The white rabbit in Alice in Wonderland has been attributed to adventure and the journey into the unknown, but it was also used in Donnie Darko with a heavy symbolism there too. In that movie, the white rabbit was used to symbolize a connection between two worlds, just as a rabbit tunnels between two locations. That movie has heavy themes of alternate worlds or universes, but also themes of accepting your fate. The main character in that movie has to accept the fact that he needs to die in order for balance to be restored to the universe. This could be a major hint to the fate of the friend group in Reanimal. This is yet another key theme that Reanimal shares with Little Nightmares. That game had the idea that the world itself is a nightmare world, one separate to the waking one. The characters in that game travelled there in their sleep. Now in Reanimal, it seems like we will have a similar theme. The amount of beds in this trailer could be a hint, but we also see the girl later in the trailer in a dreamlike state, being lifted off the floor by some supernatural force with the words, "Wake up!" I think the white rabbit mask definitely has a deeper symbolism, and I'm sure we'll all be going down the rabbit hole on this one. Going back to the boy's mask though, and you can see the sack in a better view, rope and all. But the way that he wears it makes it look like it has ears, almost like a pig. I wonder if the children are pretending to be animals, hoping that the monstrous animals we see in the game will leave them alone. Or perhaps it's a parallel between the two, prey becoming predator. Remember how Little Nightmares 1 ended? I'd keep a close eye on Rabbit Girl if I were you. Now this next scene is incredibly interesting. We see the two children running down a corridor with what looks like empty human skin sacks slithering along the floor after them. Now this makes them look like snakes, which I think is a huge hint for what is going on in the game. We see that the animals are coming back to life and are being warped into human-animal hybrids, growing human limbs and so on. Again, the name Reanimal being a huge hint there. Well, it appears that the reverse is also happening. Maybe these humans reanimated into snakes, these things actually being shed skin, just like how snakes shed their own skin. In yet another fantastically creepy sequence, we see this guy, who I'm going to call the Smiling Man, crawling across the table with the children hiding below. Now, not only is this guy absolutely creepy, but if you look more closely, it appears like he actually crawls out of this person's body. These people also look hollow like the snake people, so perhaps there is an alternate explanation for them. Perhaps this man is eating them from the inside, or maybe these are completely different to the snake people. We then get a proper look at just how big this sheep has gotten. It's now absolutely enormous and has human legs as well as a bunch of human arms. If this is the lamb from the beginning of the trailer, then it's gone through a staggering transformation. Once again, the prey has become the predator, something I want to talk about more in the theory section. But notice here that the boy appears to be with a different child to his sister. I wonder why the two end up separated. Perhaps it's something to do with her being in this dreamlike state. The trailer then ends with one of the children saying,
I thought you were dead.
Very thematic to the game so far with the theme of death and reanimation. This is then reflected in the logo twisting and changing until it finally settles into the word Reanimal, just like the animals twist and change into their monster forms. So this trailer was absolutely brilliant, and I'm very, very excited for this game to release. But as I said earlier, there is actually a deeper connection to Little Nightmares than you might think. You might have noticed that throughout this breakdown I have alluded to the theme of the game. I believe the major theme of Reanimal is prey becoming predator. If you look at the animals that are returning, many of them are prey animals, or more specifically, livestock. We have the lamb, the pig from the teaser, and now one in the trailer. These are animals that humans breed and kill for food, so the irony here is that the livestock are now hunting and presumably eating the humans. Spiders too are an animal that often pose no danger to humans, but yet we often kill them. But now it seems like the spiders are getting revenge as well. But this idea of having a major theme be a commentary on humanity is something that Tarsier incorporated into Little Nightmares. The first Little Nightmares was originally called Hunger, and that game had a bunch of metaphors and messages about it. 6 had a supernatural hunger. The guests were greedy and gluttonous. The children were starving. Even the moor itself, the location of the first game, was shaped like a giant mouth and quite literally swallowed those who entered. The second game was themed around escapism, the need to get away. The Pale City residents were so desperate for escapism that they allowed themselves to be consumed by their televisions. Literally. 6 was trying to escape the Pale City throughout that entire game, and Mono, by the end, was left waiting for his own escape attempt as he slowly transformed into the Thin Man. Both of these games were commentary on the darker sides of humanity, our flaws exaggerated and emphasized. Now Reanimal is doing the same thing, although this time it's how predatory humanity really can be and how prey can end up becoming the predator. But there is an even bigger connection between the two series, the animals. Reanimal features these animals that are growing far larger than they should, an extreme version of animal gigantism. But this is something that Tarsier tried to incorporate into Little Nightmares several times. The concept art for Little Nightmares shows several references to a pig, even a humanoid-looking pig character. Now, for whatever reason, these were removed from the game, but we can still see several references to the pig in portraits and signs. But what makes this even more strange is that we can see a ham leg in the moor that is absolutely enormous. This would have meant the pig itself would have been a giant. But in Little Nightmares 2, this theme is continued. We can find a giant rat in this bear trap in the first level, even though we know that normal-sized rats exist in that world. We can see a moth in this cage that has also grown far larger than it should have. The concept art for Little Nightmares 2 also shows a colossal moose with its guts spilling out, although again, this didn't make it into the game, only the normal-sized taxidermy remains as a hint of what could have been. So Little Nightmares has always had these hints of animal gigantism, but they were never really at the forefront of the games. The fact that all of these animals ended up cut is very interesting. It seems like there is a theme that Tarsier have always wanted to explore, and they are finally able to do that with Reanimal. But even further, looking through the numerous in-game portraits, you can see a lot of similarities between the two games. This rabbit mask, for example, looks very similar to this owl with a rabbit face, something that I notice every time I play Little Nightmares 1. Finally, if I am correct with the themes of the game, then it reminds me a lot of 6's journey throughout Little Nightmares 1 and 2. She begins her journey as a sort of prey, always trapped, always hunted, but by the end of the first game, she becomes the predator. She begins her journey as a child in a nightmare, but by the end, she is the nightmare. Since Little Nightmares 2 was a prequel and Little Nightmares 3 seems to be focusing on brand new characters, we've never truly seen the conclusion to 6's story, unless of course Supermassive surprises us. The fact that Little Nightmares 3 has booth number 6 at Gamescom does give me a little bit of hope for that though. But going back to Reanimal, it seems that Tarsier have been given much more freedom. It almost feels like their shackles are off, so to speak. So at least to me, it seems like Reanimal is the game that Tarsier always wanted to make. This is especially evident if you look at the original trailer for Little Nightmares, or as it was known then, Hunger. That trailer shows a much darker version of Little Nightmares compared to what eventually released. Now looking at how dark Reanimal looks, I think we can see that this is the tone Tarsier originally wanted for Little Nightmares. So I think it's safe to say that despite not having any legal connections to Little Nightmares, Reanimal is the spiritual successor. It shares far more of its DNA than I was expecting, which makes me very excited to see where this story will take us. But what about you? Are you excited for this new adventure? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you want to see all my future coverage on this game, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.